Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast. My name is Andy Spiteri, and I am joined by a very special guest this week. One of my colleagues from Zelda Dungeon, one of the lead copy editors of the site, editor-in-chief of Boss Rush Games, host of Nintendo Pal Block. Man, this guy's got more on his resume than you can shake a stick at. David Lasby. David, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. As a peek behind the curtains, so Dakota is still away on holidays this week, so we needed someone to fill in. And as a peek behind the curtains, David was a big Alien, or I shouldn't say was, is a big Alien fan, and is just now starting to get into Metroid. So it's really kind of like the perfect blend and the perfect mix and the perfect time for you to finally come on the Omega Metroid podcast. Tell us about your journey into Metroid really quick.
Yeah, I've been a lifelong science fiction fan. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and so watching the Aliens films as a kid was like, that just created my love of all things science fiction, and, played Nintendo my whole life, but relatively recently got into Metroid. It's one of the few Nintendo franchises that I haven't taken a deep dive, and with Dread coming out, I just realized, like, it's time, and of course, since diving in pretty deep with Zero Mission and Samus Returns, I've just really learned that it's pretty much everything I love about science fiction and games. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, I think that it worked out pretty cool because I was looking for someone that I knew was a big fan of the Alien franchise, and then I guess that kind of indirectly led to Metroid, because it almost started off as homework, right?
Yeah, it really did. You talked about, hey, here's a chance to talk about, the Aliens franchise. And I was like, all right, I was already kind of tinkering around with Metroid, but it's like time to sell my soul a little bit, just like all consuming me for these past few weeks here. And it's been such a fun deep dive, and I'm really glad I have. So I feel fully converted.
That's what we love to hear. All right, well, we are back with an inspired by Metroid game, and it's our first inspired by Metroid in, God, forever. And we took a break on that for good reason. Obviously, Metroid Dread was announced, and as a matter of fact, there was a new trailer that came out for Metroid Dread as part of the Dread Report, the fourth Dread Report, which we will do a deep dive into next week. But, man, just really quickly, that trailer was like, ooh. That gave me some feels. You had, I'm presuming what's a flashback of the SA-X in there, which is very pertinent to today. You just had all the Chozo stuff. God, it looked so good. Man, October can't come quick enough.
I was excited about that, and couldn't help but notice Nintendo's trends of heroes with glowing hands. So,
yeah, right? I guess
pretty excited about that.
That is what that's all about. All right, well, let's get into the inspired by Metroid game that we are here to talk about today, Alien Isolation. And I feel like it's very apropos that we are talking about Alien, the game, on the Metroid podcast, because I'm a big Alien fan. I've always been. Obviously, Metroid really was inspired by Alien in so many ways, from the science fiction aesthetic to the way that the Metroids kind of evolve, similar to a Xenomorph, to the way, I mean, God, Ridley, named after Ridley Scott, like, the connection is always strong. And actually, when we started the podcast, it was always our intention to eventually do a deep dive into the first movie, Alien, the one that really got it kicked off back in 1981. So it's very apropos, like I said, that when they make this big AAA Alien game, that they model it after the 3D, granted, but the Metroidvania genre, which is, it's just like, it's funny how that works, because like Metroid is inspired by Alien, and now this game was inspired by Metroid, so it's kind of a nice circle. So I've always been a huge Alien fan. Especially Alien 1, like the first one, I actually really love Covenant and Prometheus too. I know that a lot of people don't, but I'm a big fan of those. I know that you're probably the biggest Alien fan that I know, Dave. When did you get into this series?
So, when I was really young, probably way too young to watch the films, if I'm being honest, but my dad would let me watch them anyway, because I just was so into that kind of thing. And so, probably like 7 or 8 years old, I started watching all the Aliens films, and it just completely captured my imagination. The way the storytelling was so in depth, and so many of the things that I like about the Metroid franchise with the sort of atmospheric environmental storytelling, the films really do that as well, and it just really gives you this sense of being part of a larger world. And it also coincided with my love of video games. There's been so many great Aliens games over the years, and I do think Alien Isolation is probably one of the best one. And it's funny, you talk about Metroid franchise being influenced by Alien and then vice versa. I love that reciprocal relationship, and I think both are examples of films and video games being great art. Sometimes snooty academics kind of look down on those mediums, and I think both these franchises do such a great job and show what's really possible in these mediums. So I love it.
I mean, yeah, man, like the amount of influence and the just really goes beyond like kind of the obvious, like naming the character Ridley, how the Metroids evolve. It was that, like, I'll never forget the first time I watched Alien, that sense of dread. How about that? The sense of dread. Like that was like so prevalent throughout the whole thing. You had this unstoppable force that was stalking you. And, we were going to, I've been playing Alien Isolation for like the better part of, God, it's got to be like 3 months now. So we were going to talk about this a lot earlier. And then, of course, Metroid Dread was announced. And I feel like it's even more topical and even more pertinent to talk about Alien Isolation now, knowing what we know about the upcoming Metroid Dread, than it was back 3 months ago. But I want to talk about that right away at the top of the show here, because I think when you play Alien Isolation, like the thing, I mean, there's a lot of things that remind me of a Metroid game, but like the thing I think that just is so strong, it comes through so much, is like the atmosphere of this game. Like that's really the thing to me that like really kind of makes a Metroid game. Like I'll never forget landing in Super Metroid for the first time. Like there was such an atmosphere, like it was almost a character of itself. And I feel like that's really kind of like the same thing in this game. Like you come into the ship and like you know that something's not right. The ship looks incredible, by the way, but it's all like graffitied and like it's just in tatters, and you know that at any second things could go really, really wrong. There's just this like air of danger in the air, and I think that this game just does such a phenomenal job of like keeping you on your toes, and just that tension and that dread, and it never really lets up until you finish the game at the end, and arguably even into the credits. So like it's such a well constructed atmosphere, a well constructed sense of like tension, dread, everything in between, that I think that more than anything else is what really gave me like the Metroid vibes in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with what you said. So many games have kind of throwaway effects, whether it's the flashing lights or things like that, to sort of create this tension for the player. But one of the things that Alien Isolation does well, that's so similar to Metroid games, is that environmental storytelling. So right away, when you land on the station, right on Sevastopol, you notice that the graffiti that you mentioned is telling a story, warning about the Worker Joe androids, or Marshall Waits and his sort of corrupt authoritarian rule on the station, right? And so you find yourself sort of paying attention to the environment to learn the story and to know what's going on. And, I feel the same way when I play Metroid games, watching the change in the landscape as, the Metroids sort of take over, or even just, wondering, what's going on as I go deeper into the depths. So that certainly jumps out to me. And then the other thing you mentioned, this sense of dread. So many survival horror games, which Alien Isolation is, rely on these sort of cheap jump scare tactics, right? And, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that if people like that. But the way Alien Isolation builds this sustained sense of dread that just builds throughout the game, where you always feel like you have to be looking over your shoulder, it builds this terror that other games fail to achieve because it's not relying on these cheap tricks. It's just this constant tension of always having to be vigilant, and it builds so masterfully to the game's conclusion. So I love that.
Yeah, and I think like actually what you said right there also feeds into, it's almost like a cycle where like what you said feeds into the fact that like you have to really take your time and go slow, and like you have to constantly survey your environment and like make sure that there's nothing around the corner or there's nothing hiding in the shadows. And like the slower you go, the more you absorb, the more terrifying it gets, and then the more terrified you are, you have to go slower and make sure that nothing's going to get you. It's just like a really great cycle that this game achieves. And it's like it's such a you could almost say it's exhausting sometimes, because like you're like, oh my god, like I got to be, my head is on a swivel. I can't decide if I should run as fast as I can or if I should take like 20 minutes to cross a single hallway. So I think this game does like a really good job of kind of balancing those elements and creating that unique atmosphere that like I kept on coming back to kind of some Metroid Fusion, but a lot of Super Metroid. Like when you land in Zebes for the first time, and like there's that rain and there's that ambiance. To me, that's the atmosphere, and that's what this game does so well. And also like I wasn't necessarily I wouldn't say that the music was like a standout point in this game for me, but I will say that the way that they use music, especially when the alien itself is close and like it really just like ramps up, is quite masterful. It's very it's very dreadful.
Yeah, that's funny that music didn't stand out for you in this game, because I would say the back half of the game for me, the music played a big part in the tension. The like change when, not trying to give too many spoilers here, but the space station, as so often happens in alien stories, has a crisis, right? And there's fires everywhere, and you're running from the creature, and the way the music builds and sort of crescendos, to me, made the tension at some points like almost unbearable. Like I will fully own like going and hiding in a locker just to catch my breath for a minute because before I could like do the next part, because it's so awesome.
Yeah, like even when there's nothing around, actually, sometimes I would just go into the locker just to like just chill out, just to breathe. And even then, like you don't feel completely safe, but you feel more safe than maybe you would just kind of out and about. But like I wonder if like when I played it, because I actually played in like I said, I played over the course of like 3 months. So I kind of played in like half hour or hour bursts, because that's all I could handle at one time, because it's like the atmosphere is so heavy and it weighs you down so much that like to play it for longer, I was just like, I was literally sweating sitting in my basement.
Oh, me too.
So yeah, I wonder if like the music, it almost like it almost becomes an invisible part of the dread that you feel. And like I think that the music was quite good. It's just like I think that I was so focused on staying alive and whatnot that it's almost like you don't notice it, but it's there. It's like it's subliminal. There. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think, and that's something that Metroid games do, really well as well, right? That the music creating the the emotional tension, in complement to the environment and the visuals that you're doing.
And another thing that this game does really well, speaking of environmental kind of sounds and stuff like that, and it's something that I wish and I hope and that I think Metroid is going to incorporate in the future, but like they really do a good job of like having like sounds in the background, people talking, or like if you find a let's say a recording or something like that, you can hear the recording out loud. And I'm hoping that as great as it is, let's say in Metroid Prime, finding all the Chozo lore and stuff like that, it would be nice if you could just listen to it and you could keep moving. And I've talked about this before in Fusion especially, but like I just love that you can like play the sounds and you can learn a little bit more about the story, but you can keep moving while you're doing it. And it's also risky to do that as well, because that sound attracts the alien. So I think that it's like a really well put together idea, and like something that I hope that Metroid kind of adopts in the future.
For sure. I was thinking that too, particularly with a game like Dread. I'll never forget the first time I was listening to the Nostromo flight recorder, and all of a sudden the alien just speared its tail through me, and that was the enemy. Yep. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I thought it was okay, on this little like audio menu. And I was like, okay, I guess that's why they let you listen while you're moving. So, yeah, in terms of that feeling that you're never safe and you got to keep on alert, I think it's a great gameplay mechanic.
It's very like risk reward, because you obviously want to learn about the story, but like you also don't want to get impaled by the Xenomorph. So like, yeah, it's done really well. I want to talk about the Xenomorph itself here. And so for anybody that has not played Alien Isolation and doesn't know the general premise of the game, it is this. You are on a spaceship where things have really gotten out of control. There are Worker Joe androids on the spaceship, and they have turned against you. The rest of the humans that are on the spaceship have kind of formed like packs or gangs, if you will, in order to survive, and are obviously very hostile towards everyone that they don't know. But by far the biggest threat aboard the station is the alien, and the alien will stalk you. And there are certain times where there is a certain scenario where you have to get past him, but for the most part, it's a lot of like, it's a highly powered AI behind the alien, and he will follow you. He'll follow sounds, he'll follow noises and stuff like that, and he just stalks you relentlessly throughout this game. And it's like incredibly terrifying, because he's so big and physically imposing, and just like they did such a good job making this alien look like just this force of nature, and you can never damage it. I mean, you can hit it with a flamethrower and he'll go away for a minute, but like you really got to make the most of those seconds after you hit him with the flamethrower, because he's coming right back.
Yeah, and he's angry at that point. So
oh yeah, he's not happy if you hit him with the flames. In fact, when you hit him with the flames, he can still damage you pretty decently.
Right.
I've died hitting him with the flamethrower before. But yeah, it's just he's stalking you, and it's just this relentless pursuit of this enemy that is basically unstoppable. And it just reminded me so much of when I was watching the Metroid Dread trailer. I really think that's what they were trying to get across with the E.M.M.Is, is like the same sense of like, here is this unstoppable force that is trying to get you. Although I would even argue that the alien is far more terrifying than what we've seen so far of the E.M.M.Is. But I mean, they really sell this alien as like this, like just force, force that is never going to give up. It's terrifying.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of I think really exciting modifications you can do too, which I love that the game production company included. So you can turn the difficulty up all the way up to what amounts to very hard or nightmare mode, where the artificial intelligence of the Xenomorph is just crazy. So if you're hiding underneath a desk, which is normally a pretty safe space on normal, it will actually get down and crawl under the desk and drag you out. Or if you're hiding in a locker, there's a button that you can push to hold your breath, and if you don't hold your breath, it'll hear you and rip the locker open. And actually, if you have your Xbox Kinect, which I know is like outdated technology, but if you have it hooked up and play on an Xbox One, you can actually have a feature where the Kinect will listen for sounds in the room. And so if you breathe too loud or the Xenomorph will hear you and go and kill your character, which is just like, I mean, I'm already like sweating. I couldn't even imagine playing like that. But, so I love the variability there. And I do wonder with the E.M.M.Is, will there be any opportunity for players who want more of a challenge to actually increase that AI a little bit, so that you always have it at this appropriate level of terror for you as a player, which I think I would really enjoy that.
Yeah, I think I would too. And I think that it's probably safe to say that we'll see, some different difficulty tiers. I couldn't even imagine playing Alien Isolation on Nightmare. I couldn't even imagine. Like, I died so much in this game. That's almost a critique of mine, is that you die so often that it kills the momentum in certain aspects, or it's just kind of defeating, where it's like, ugh, like, yeah, I just did this and I don't really want to do it again. But on the flip side, when you complete something and you make it to where you need to go, it's an incredibly satisfying feeling. But
when you hear the little save booth, you just run to them.
So for anyone that doesn't know, there's these little telephone booths basically, and they're save stations. You can hear them beeping, like beep, beep,
Yeah.
and like whenever I hear, I literally hightail as fast as I can. I've saved while I've had Worker Joes chasing me before.
Oh
Just so
gosh.
when I died, I could spawn there, and hopefully they're not on my tail,
Right.
which worked. But I mean, like the alien is just so incredibly intense. I mean, obviously the design of the Xenomorph is like maybe one of the most iconic movie creature designs of all time. If there's another one that's more iconic, I can't think of it. So I mean, it obviously had that already going for it, but
Yep.
the way that they just like adapted that into this game and like made it in motion, I just thought was like so impressive. The graphics in this game are obviously like off the charts, which is crazy because this game came out like 7 years ago and it still looks awesome.
It really
But
holds up well.
really, really holds up well. He looks awesome.
Yeah, and you know, they do a good job too of making the cutscenes feel pretty seamless with the gameplay, so it never really like takes you out of the terror that you feel. And you know, for people that don't know, the Xenomorph, you know, can go anywhere. So if you're hiding in an air vent, you could be crawling along thinking you're relatively safe, and it'll be just hanging out in the air vents. Or if you walk below, you know, in a normal walkway, you got to always be keeping an eye out for just a little bit of drool coming down from the air vents, because it'll snatch you up and pull you into the vents. Or, you know, so you're never really safe. And, you know, like Andy mentioned, you know, your weapons. I remember when I got a shotgun and I thought, okay, you know, I've got like a decent, you know, weapon here. I watched the second film, Aliens. I saw how quickly the bugs go down, right? Well, no, not the case in Alien Isolation. The thing is, you know, truly impervious and much more akin to what we saw in the first film, which is great. I love that because, you know, it really forces you to try and use your wits to outsmart this creature because you're not going to take it down with combat.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up, actually. So I love Alien. I think Aliens is really good, but it's just like it's not the same for me, and I think that's because they devalued the Xeno a little bit. Like there were so many of them, and they were defeated relatively easily, right? Like compared to the first film, where like this thing just felt like an insurmountable threat, whereas in Aliens, you know, you had the team with higher power weaponry that was able to combat them a little bit more, and obviously you had the Queen Metroid, the Queen Alien at the end, which was like your big bad, and I guess a natural progression because you know you want to get bigger with every movie. But to me, like the first movie was always like the real one that stood out to me, just because of the way that they treated this alien with respect. And I really think it shows like in this game how the developers like really gravitated towards that, because there's never really more than one alien. I think at one point there might be two, but there's always like one alien, and there's never any other like major threats on that level. There are threats, but you can combat them, but the alien is always just like out of reach. So I really love that they kind of did the same thing that they did in the first Alien movie in this game. I think that this like translates really well.
Oh, for sure. And, you know, I love what James Cameron added in the second film in terms of the lore, you know, and I think that lore, you know, certainly you talked about that reciprocal relationship of influencing games like Metroid. And I think that, you know, certainly defined video game genres for the next few decades. I mean, how many times have we seen people imitate Space Marines? But I feel like there could have been a way to keep the respect for the, you know, the Xenomorph without, you know, just making it essentially a bug hunt.
Yeah.
So I totally hear that gripe. But, you know, in terms of the game, I will say there is one or two parts where there's more than one threat on the level, but I love how they handled it. I don't know if you know, because there's so many options, but you can like throw noisemakers, you know, in where the humans are, and rather than taking them out and let, you know, the Xeno do the work for you. And I love that sort of problem solving, you know, incorporate the threat into how you choose to solve a situation. I love that.
I love it too. I was gonna bring that up actually. It's like it's such like a great and that particular example that you brought up. I remember being on one part of the ship, and there was a group of humans, and I had tried to make it through, and they were gunning me down like left and right, and I was like, okay, risk reward. What do I think is more deadly? Basically summoning the alien and hiding in a locker and hoping to God that he doesn't hear me breathing, or trying to get past these guys. So I tried it by throwing the noisemaker, and the alien did. He took out all of those guys, and I think he got me once, but then the next time I tried it, I made it through, and I felt like, oh man, I was just patting myself on the back. I was like, good job, Andy. You really
it feels good.
Everybody. Yeah. Okay, here's a random question for you, because we're talking about aliens and Alien.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like Alien versus Predator, like for what it is?
If I just accept it that it's gonna be garbage storytelling and whatever. It's funny you bring it up because my son is now old enough. We've been watching the films together, and we've watched the Alien vs. Predator movies. And separately, I love both franchises, and I love the comics actually for AVP. The films are hot garbage. I know they are, and yet I'm such a sucker for anything aliens related that I will still watch it. So.
I agree. We watched that for Virtual Theater, my other podcast about video game movies and the stories that shape them. And I was just like, this is like so cheesy, but I kind of love it, actually. Obviously, Aliens are way better than Predators.
For sure.
Yeah, the Alien in Alien Isolation is just like, God, I can't put it over enough, like how much of a factor into this game's success I think that it is. Also because like it's never that far away. You always have this noise or this detector that detects motion, and it's very nerve-wracking because you go to rely on that, and then you pull it out and like, hey, the alien's close by again. He's never that far. So it's just that constant dread that, man, like, it gets you.
And it can hear your motion tracker, right? So there's like that, like, do I risk pulling it out and hopefully like getting some info I can use, or do I, just, it's not worth it, right? I think the part that I'm thinking of, that there's this shocking development. I would love to talk about that.
We can go into spoilers here.
Okay.
If you want. So if you're listening, spoilers, we'll try and not be like completely egregious, but we're going to talk about, especially in the latter parts when we get into the story specifically, we're going to talk about the story.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So hopefully if anybody that was trying to avoid spoilers, they've skipped forward, but there's this moment where you go down into the core of the Sevastopol station and you find that there's actually a hive there. Right. And so one of the things that, you talk about how terrifying the Xenomorph is all game. There's this moment where it's like, oh, there's not just one, there's actually hundreds just like crawling around. And of course, like you said, you never really have to face more than one, at a given time in terms of gameplay, but just the job that they did creating this terror all game long. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in a hive. First of all, it's brilliant storytelling. It's awesome for gameplay. And it made me think about what could have been possible for a film like Aliens, the second film, had it been done a little differently.
Yeah, totally. It's funny that you bring that part up, actually, because you haven't made it to Metroid Fusion on your Metroid journey yet, right?
Not yet.
All right, so maybe plug your ears for the next 10 seconds for what I'm about to say.
All right.
It's a spoiler. But the moment that you go to the alien hive and you find out, that's akin to the moment that you find out in Metroid Fusion that there are 10 SA-Xs running around the BSL. So it is incredibly terrifying to learn that while you've been dealing with this one singular threat this whole game and barely making it alive, there's like a whole lot more right behind the corner. So it does a fantastic job of that. I want to talk about Metroid Fusion actually just for a quick second, because for years and years and years, the Metroid community really used Alien Isolation as like the blueprint for how they would want Metroid Fusion to be remade, if ever it was to be remade, with the idea being that the SA-X would be a substitute for the Xenomorph. And the SA-X, of course, is an alien parasite that has copied Samus with her full powers and full abilities, and you are very much weak and not at full strength in Metroid Fusion. And so the idea being that, like, I've heard Metroid fans say I would love to have the SA-X with the same type of AI ability as the Xenomorph from Alien Isolation. And, playing this game, I'd heard that for a long time. playing it, I gotta agree, that would be awesome. Like it would be very, very tense. And I think that there are some, Metroid Fusion creates some scenarios where it is incredibly tense and you have to escape the SA-X. But I think that if you traded that in for the overall dread of this game, I think that could actually be like something really special if they ever went that route.
Would you want that in a full 3D remake?
Oh, I think for a 3D remake would be awesome. I don't think that I don't think they'd ever remake Fusion as a full 3D remake. I could see them doing something maybe akin to like 2.5D, but just like and I think that Metroid Dread might just be this remake that we think that we want with Fusion, where like the E.M.M.Is kind of serve as your substitute instead of the SA-X. Because obviously, we saw in the Dread report in the trailer, we saw a glimpse of the SA-X. We don't know if that was a flashback or not.
Right.
But obviously it's going to have some influence on the events of Dread. And, the developers have stated that SA-X was such a huge influence on Metroid Dread anyways. So I think that a lot of the stuff that fans for a long time said that they wanted to see in a Metroid Fusion remake might just be in Metroid Dread anyways. But,
sure.
I mean, man, can you imagine, like, just walking around and here... And instead of the Xenomorph popping out, it's the SA-X, and it's got, like, the ice beam, and, man, that's, like, oof. That's scary.
Yeah. And it's awesome because it's such a good example of less being more sometimes, right? That you don't have to have, a million threats on screen or throwing all this stuff at players. If you have one sort of insurmountable object that you have to be really clever and on your game to figure out how to outsmart or outmaneuver, that's just as compelling gameplay to me.
Yeah, I agree. The thought that there is just this unstoppable force and you've got nothing to contend with it's just like so it's scary. It creates that atmosphere, I think, more than anything else could. So that would be very cool if they ever did that in Metroid Fusion, a remake.
Are you typically a fan of stealth missions?
Yeah, I think so. I love Metal Gear Solid. I like the Part in Zero mission where you have your Zero suit on. So yeah, I like stealth gameplay.
Yeah, I mean, it does have certain kind of overlaps with that. I mean, it's not quite the same as stealth missions, but just that idea of having to be clever to get by, not just blasting. I mean, I love the shooting aspect of Metroid games and sort of that classic sci-fi feel, but adding that extra element of using your intellect as well as your blaster, that's something that I enjoy.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's going to be a big part of Metroid Dread, because I think, very, very, very early on in that game, we saw in the Treehouse footage, you get the Phantom Cloak, which is an item that camouflages you. So yeah, I think that they're really going to lean on that, which is why I was just like, man, Alien Isolation seems like more topical to Metroid than maybe ever before. But we've talked about the alien here. I want to quickly go over some of the other threats on board, because it's not just the alien, although he's definitely the big bad. Worker Joes, dude, holy cow, these things are creepy. They're almost as creepy as the alien. They've got their like lifeless eyes and bald heads. They look very much like the engineers from Prometheus. They do. They're creepy.
Yeah, and when you have to cut the power sometimes to get by certain parts, or you turn on some vents to create some fog to allow you to sneak by, the Worker Joe's eyes have this really eerie glow. Yeah. It's just terrifying. And they talk to you in such a calm way, sort of informing you that they're going to have to kill you now because you've broken the rules or you're not allowed to be in a certain area. And yet they have these sort of bursts of violence. You see them take out some human players who are in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it's shocking how violent they can be. Sort of throwing humans into walls until they die, and they do a good job of creating that terror in something different than the Xenomorph.
And there's a part in the game, probably about halfway through, where you are led to believe that you've eliminated the Xenomorph, which is actually like a godsend, because I feel like you can only take so much tension for so long, but they replace it with all the Worker Joes that have went crazy. And that was actually one of my favorite parts, because I felt a little bit lighter knowing that at least the Xeno wasn't on my tail for right now. But I mean, I probably died as many times to, maybe not as many, but I died a lot to the Worker Joes. They're very like a very different kind of threat, and I feel like they're more like they have more of a distinct set pattern than the Xenomorph does, and you're able to like defeat them with weaponry, but like at a great cost because weaponry is so scarce. So I thought that they were like a really good substitute in the middle part of the game for like the alien, and it was nice to have like that change of pace.
For sure. And they have varying levels of difficulty as well. So you get kind of used to throwing an EMP grenade at them or using your shotgun or whatever. And then you find that there are some worker Joes who have put on a rubber suit that makes them, impervious to your ways of dealing with them prior, right? So you have to adapt.
There are two scenarios where the worker Joes really, I was just like, oh my God. The first is, everybody listening to this knows the feeling where you get to a room and like there is all kinds of ammo.
Oh yeah,
all the ammo that you need, and it's just like, okay,
what is going to happen?
Something is going down, yeah. And I think you have to face off with like 10 worker Joes or something like that are all on fire. That was intense. And then when you are in the core of Apollo, by the way, is the main AI that runs the space station. But you have to go into the core of Apollo, and then there are some rooms with like you can trigger the electrified floors and stuff. That was also just like super, super intense. One of my favorite parts of the game.
For sure, yeah. It created a new kind of terror and eeriness about it, and it felt very different from what you experienced with the Xenomorph, and yet in some ways like just as compelling and gripping.
I think so. Yeah, I love that Apollo room. By the way, that was one of my favorite sections of the game, just because like, it looked so cool. Like one server room was like this awesome blue, the other one was awesome orange. It looked like something right out of Blade Runner, which was like incredible. That was a wicked part of the game, I thought.
Lots of notes of Blade Runner, and so many sort of loving nods to the original Alien film when you sort of talking to Mother, right?
Yeah. That was one of my favorite portions of the game, actually. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, has there ever been like a good Blade Runner video game?
Oh gosh, not one that I can think of. I'm sure somebody listening, maybe knows, but I can't think of one.
That's criminal.
Yeah,
that's criminal. That this series, I just did some fact checking here. So there is a point and click adventure released in 1997, and that looks like it's the only one. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, because I would love to play a Blade Runner video game. But let's talk about the humans here for a quick sec too, because they are also a threat on the station. And on one hand, I always felt like super bad whenever I had to take a human out, because like you've got this other threat, these androids, this alien, and like you feel like you want to stick together, but like the way that they I don't know, like the tribalism of all these guys that like band together is also kind of terrifying too, because but it's terrifying in a different real world way for me, because it's like this is probably what would happen if something like this ever happened, where like they go nuts and are shooting people they don't know.
Totally. I mean, there's so much, obviously it's not the focus of the podcast here, but, the Alien franchise is not short on social commentary. And it's such a good, compelling monster story, right, that people often miss their critique of sort of human behavior, space capitalism, if you will. And you use the word tribalism, and I think that's really true. You want to band together. It's like, oh my goodness, there's so many ways to die on Sebastopol. Like, we shouldn't be fighting.
We don't need to fight each other,
right? And yet, more often than not, sort of human nature wins out, and you get double crossed, or people don't trust you, and ultimately in the Alien franchise, the real monster is humanity, right? The Xenomorph is just doing what it's been designed to do, right? But human beings, there's all sorts of lines in the first two Alien films about at least they don't some words I can't use on the podcast, stab each other in the back, right?
Yeah. It's too bad. Like, I always felt like whenever I would have to, I never shot a human, obviously because I didn't want the alien to hear, but also just because, like, I don't know, I felt like if I was clubbing them to death, maybe they'd still be alive. I don't know. Also, like, you find out kind of, I think later in the game, they're not like obviously an overarching part of the big story, but like you do find out about the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, and like they're kind of the ones that really set everything in motion here. And I guess we'll wait to talk about the story here, but basically they purchased the ship like right before the game's events, and they are much like in the film Alien. Everyone is expendable to the cost of getting the alien back. So it's kind of a familiar story in some ways. Where, yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Like the humans are the problem, and I love that about this franchise.
Yeah, you know, I couldn't help but notice, you know, the similarities in storytelling with Weyland-Yutani wanting a bioweapon and the behavior of the Federation, and you know, this sense
totally,
you want to trust, but then do they really have your best interest in mind?
Yeah, I mean, you literally pretty much the same thing happened on the BSL, where the Galactic Federation, they want the SA-X, and everything else is secondary. So lots and lots and lots of different parallels to be drawn here. So that's a great observation. I want to talk about items really quick before we talk about the story here. A key part of any good Metroidvania is having cool items. And I feel like this game has lots of cool items that you can come back to and open up secret areas or locked areas and get extra, I wouldn't call them power-ups, but at least bullets or something like that, something to help you along your way. Cool items here. The ion torch, I thought, is a favorite of mine, because even though using it is like so nerve-wracking to me, because like it's so loud and it's so clunky, and I'm just like, oh my god, like I have to be faster. I think that the what is it, like the wrench club or whatever it is, I can't remember the name.
Oh gosh, I didn't write that one down, but yeah, you bust through door locks and then crank them open,
whack people with it as well. is good. And then I don't know if you've ever played the Arkham games or not, but there's the code hacker that you get in this game really reminds me of the thing that Batman uses in the Arkham games to like bust open locks and stuff like that. So that stuck out to me, especially because we've covered Batman Arkham Asylum on Inspired by Metroid before. So that was cool, although using it was like super, super tense. I remember when you first get it, you have to go and hack an elevator door, and the alien is like prowling around in this big room. It was like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Go, go, go. And then of course you mess up because you're overthinking it. So yeah, good stuff.
You know, it's funny. I played the original Arkham Asylum, and I had completely forgotten about that until this moment. That the hacking tool, the security access tuner, and of course in Alien Isolation, as the game goes on, the little hacking puzzles that you need to do get more complicated and take even longer as the stakes are even higher. So that tension is great. And I love what you said too about the hacking, or not the hacking kit, but the ion torch. You definitely, you know, I like to try in 100% games. Alien Isolation was too hard to 100% for me, but I liked going back and trying to get all the video and audio logs. And so going back to some of those earlier areas in the game with the tools or items that you get later was definitely a good reward. And kind of seeing areas of the map that you wouldn't have been able to access before. And so that's, of course, very Metroid.
Yep. Very reciprocal relationship. It's just very apropos. I kind of love it. Yeah, I guess I will say that I wasn't really a fan of crafting in this game. Not because like you had to pause to do it and you could die while you do it. I think that's actually fine. But like I would have loved to, like, if I went to click on like some health, for example, if I just had all the necessary components to just be able to click like L1 right away and it fuses, instead of like having to go and like select all that different stuff. So I wasn't really a fan of that. And like I don't know if you feel the same way, but I feel like I went throughout the entire game and I was always finding bins and like containers and stuff like that, and it always had the stuff that I already had, and it never had the stuff that I needed, like ever. Like I think I crafted one E.M.P. mine the entire game, and I could never find the parts for it. And like it's not like you can carry very much either, so even when you would have like a fully loaded inventory, you could make like 3 like health vials at most, and then you're out of luck again. But yeah, I feel like I was just like always finding stuff that I didn't need or that I already had, and you can't really stockpile it. So I was just like, walking around this Vasticle most of the time.
Yeah, I had a similar problem, and what it made me wonder is if the game was trying to get me to use stuff that I wasn't using. Like if there were other ways to, navigate past certain challenges that I needed to change my gameplay style. So, I never really got to that point. I ended up just not getting the loot, but it did make me think that there are lots of ways to accomplish your goals in Alien Isolation. And one thing I will say in defense of that, mechanic, we both love Zelda games, but like, it's just sort of a wink and a nod that Link can carry all this stuff in his pockets, right? I mean, It's an absurd, and so for the realism, I kind of like that. Yeah, I only get 3 health packs and, I need to be careful how I use them. And it definitely kept me in this element of being in the game and feeling like I personally was trying to survive this crisis. And I know I didn't play it on nightmare mode longer than just a fun trying it out because it was just too insane for me. But I know that all of the places that you get items like in drawers and things like that, they just basically stop giving you loot on nightmare mode. So I wonder if it's on easy if you would get more of those items you need.
I bet you. I can't imagine playing on nightmare mode. That would just be oh my god. But yeah, I actually think that that's probably true about, getting supplies you need and them thinking that you're using flashbangs, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like I went throughout the game, I don't think I used a single flashbang because I never really saw like the right scenario or the right opportunity to use it. Whereas like occasionally I would use Molotov cocktails, occasionally I would use EMP mines, but not very often. But I bet you that that's actually probably true, that maybe they intended you to use like items such as flashbangs or something else or flares or whatever a little bit more than maybe that we ended up using them. But that's a minor critique. I have another critique, but I'll save that for the end. I want to talk about the story, actually. And I thought that the story, for what it was actually pretty cool. I think that Amanda Ripley was like a really great, likable character. Voice acting was really great. To me, like it felt pretty much like you were just playing as Ellen Ripley. Like they were very, very, very similar. Did you get that same kind of vibe?
For sure. I mean, it was recreating a lot of what people love about the original film, and there's some sort of bonus content, downloadable content where you can play as Ripley if you want, Ellen Ripley. For me, the thing that I liked about the story of being Ripley's daughter, though, the first 2 films, when kind of taken in a whole, deal with Ripley's desire to be a mother and losing her daughter because, of course, she's away for so many years and her daughter gets old and dies, right? And in the second film, in Aliens, her interactions with Newt and saving Newt are really about her sort of fulfilling this painful loss in her life of not being a mother and not being there for her daughter, but she's there for Newt, right? So for Alien Isolation, it kind of flips that on its head. And now we're Amanda Ripley trying to find out what happened to her mother. And I really liked the symmetry of that. That sold me right away.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And yeah, just to be clear, when I say that Amanda is a lot like Ellen, that's like a compliment because
for sure.
I think everybody... I don't know anybody that doesn't love the character of Ellen Ripley, and I'm certainly not one of them. I think she's great and really inspired Samus in a lot of ways. So I thought that was cool. It was like an easy to understand, relatable story about why Amanda would put herself in kind of this precarious situation because she wants to know what happened to her mother. And I think that the payoff was actually pretty good. The supporting cast I thought was pretty good too. I think that they're obviously Amanda was the star of the show, but I think that you had like people like Samuels I thought was really good, and it kind of going back to like a theme in the first 2 Alien films were like, can we trust AIs? Can we not trust AIs? How much does Samuels know? How much is like just that kind of dichotomy I thought was really good. And then you kind of get like the nice feel good moment where you find out that like, okay, Samuels is on our side, and he's gonna help us, and he's gonna do the right thing. I thought that the scene where he like beats the tar out of that one guy or that one Orca Joe was awesome.
That was
that
shocking.
scene where he's like in the core of Apollo, I thought that was great. That was good stuff. So Samuels is probably the other standout character for me.
For sure. The only other one that I thought was kind of a compelling character was Marshall Waite's deputy, Ricardo, who... He kind of pushes back on Waite's authoritarianism a little bit. And of course, he meets with an unfortunate end.
That was so sad, by the way.
Yeah.
I was pulling for Ricardo, but wasn't.
Yeah. And a good example of environmental storytelling too, right? Because we're not really, I don't think we're given a full explanation. We just come and see him sitting in that chair, and it's just sort of like, okay.
He has the face hugger on his face, and he's
right.
Like, well, obviously we know what that means. By the way, we actually skipped over the face huggers. They use them to like very limited effect in this game, but like, oof, you gotta be on your toes when you see those alien nests around, because man. Oh. Those things can take you out real quick. But yeah, I thought that Ricardo was very good, very likable, very relatable, actually, when like, he's the only survivor of that entire crew, the Marshals. And like he kind of looks like he's in La La Land for a little bit and then snaps out of it and then kind of gets it together and helps you. So yeah, he was good.
Yeah, and he even makes a mistake at one point, right? Like there's this plot to sort of quarantine the alien in a room, and he accidentally lets it out trying to help you, right?
Yeah, poor guy. But I guess I'm glad he did, because that would have been half the game it was.
Right.
I thought that, oh God, his name is escaping me. Markov. He was
right.
Good too. Yeah, Markov was good. Just kind of like a very minor character, but he was like the captain of the ship that found
Henry Marlowe.
Yeah,
the Isidora captain.
Yeah. He was good. Not a whole lot to him, but I thought that the exchanges that he had with you while he was like kind of sitting in prison were kind of cool.
Well, did you enjoy going back to the Nostromo? I mean, not to the Nostromo, to the derelict spaceship.
So actually, I wrote that down on my list of things to bring up. I think I like the idea of it, but it was a very slow segment, and it just, you moved really slow, and it was a little bit. First of all, it was nice to have a break from the tension of the game, for sure.
It was,
but it was a little bit too slow. If you could move at normal speed, I think that would have helped that segment a lot.
I agree. I think they were really going for recreating what it must have been like going through that storm on the planet, but I think that it was unnecessarily clunky.
I agree. And actually, I would say the same thing about in the latter parts when you have to put on the spacesuit and go out and like get the coordinates for the ship to come and rescue you. That was also, it's just like, it just takes a little bit too long. And like, I get it. Like you're walking in space. Like obviously you're not going to be, running a marathon, but particularly I think for that scene when you're in a spacesuit later, Alien Isolation is a long game. So it's like at that point you're like, man, I kind of want to like I want to wrap this up.
The only thing that I will say in defense of that is, there's some moments when you're in a spacesuit where you do see some Xenomorph presence, and it makes it that much more terrifying that you can't move well. And now whether that makes the whole slow process worth it, I don't know if that is true, but I did appreciate what they were trying to do there.
I think for me, that scene in the original derelict spaceship, I think that might have just worked better as a cutscene, because I think that like what was happening was cool, and I wanted to see it. I just didn't really want to play it.
Agreed.
But yeah, I want to talk about, I think, the coolest part of the game. And you mentioned it earlier. When you get to the reactor core and you find the alien hive, holy cow. That was alien. Like, that was gameplay. That was awesome. That part of it where, like, God, going into that infested area and seeing... First of all, you think you've eliminated the alien at this point, and now there is another one, and it's like, oh my God. And not only is there that, there's facehuggers, there's alien eggs. It's super, super, like, deflating. It's like, oh my god, I'm not done.
It's
by a long
demoralizing.
shot. Yeah, I think like there was Worker Joes coming at you as you're trying to activate the core. There's like this segment, I think, had everything. This was like such an awesome like part of the game. I actually think that this should have been the end of the game, but it wasn't, which we'll get to in a little bit. But
Yeah.
I thought that this was like, I thought this segment was like so good and so impactful and so scary. Fantastic part of the game.
You know, I was late playing this game. You know, it had been out 3 or 4 years by the time I got to play it. And so I had always just thought of the game as, you know, that one game that's more like Alien than Aliens. There's just a single alien. And so, you know, when you get down there and you open the doors and you see the hive sort of webbing, I mean, I was so demoralized. I remember I literally set my controller down and just put my hands in my head. And I was just like, no way. Like, this cannot be. And of course, you know, your motion tracker just goes nuts, right? You see dots everywhere. And it's just like, I spent this whole game trying to outsmart and beat one Xenomorph. How am I going to deal with a hive?
It's horrifying. And I think that like the logical assumption that anyone would make is like, oh god, there's an alien queen in here somewhere, and
right.
like, I'm gonna have to fight this thing. And actually, I think that it's smart that you don't have to do that, because they keep the alien strong, and like that threat is still the threat, and they
Totally
don't
agree with that.
devalue the alien. So, oh my god, walking into that, I was, it's just like, oh my god, and it looks gross, and it looks just, it's so alien. That was just such a good scene. I don't even have the words for it, but it was so good. And like, it was another good mix of like, I have to be careful, and you reach that point where it's like, I'm running as fast as I can.
I'm just gonna run.
Face huggers, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, get me to that save station, and then whatever happens after that, I'll deal with.
You know,
Yeah, that was
Well, it's funny too. You talked about how gross and horrifying it looked, and that moment really just made me realize, oh, what could have been with Aliens, the film? Because, you know, and I love the film for what it is, and I love the action and adventure and all the lore it adds. But the way I found myself horrified by the hive, rather than like, oh, cool, you know, what's this story,
Yeah,
you know, thing?
yeah.
It's like, wow, I wonder what that would have felt like on the big screen.
yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I totally agree with that, actually. Like, this, because you're right. I remember watching Aliens. It's like, oh, okay, there's a million aliens. Whereas like in this one, it's just like, oh my god, there's a million aliens.
There's a million aliens.
I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah.
So such a big difference in the approach and build up to that. So yeah, I agree with that. That was awesome. Yeah, it's a great scene. I loved after when you're going and activating the reactor, and like you have all these Worker Joes coming at you, and you have that awesome nail gun. Which, by the way, took me a second to realize how that nail gun actually worked. I was
charging
like,
it?
I got it, and I was like, I fired it once, and it was like, boop. And then the Worker Joe clubbed me to death, and I was like, God, this thing sucks.
Yeah. Oh man, I got killed so many times in that spot. And yeah, and like with charging it, if you miss at all, then you're just it's over, right?
Yeah, that was just, oh my god, that was an intense scene. I thought that scene was like so good. It was so good that, and this is my big critique of this game, and I feel so I didn't look at any reviews of Alien Isolation until after I had beaten it. And actually, I feel like this critique was fairly common, but I think the game, for what this type of game is, was too long, and it should have ended at that reactor moment. But it doesn't. You continue on, and like that moment was so, like, it was so intense. It was such a burst of emotions, and like horror, dread, excitement, victory once you get the reactor to detach. That the rest of it, I feel like, was kind of a little bit flat almost, because you come down from that, and then you have to you get some great scenes with like some of the characters in the game, and like that's cool. But like for me, it was just like that was like the peak, and then coming down from that, everything else was like I was ready for it to be over with after that scene. And I think it went on a little bit too long, and I feel like I saw a lot of people comment in a similar manner. I mean, also because like this type of game, like we've been talking about the atmosphere, the dread, the tension, like that takes its toll on you. Like you can only take so
It
much
does.
of that before it's like, man, I gotta
take a
it's time
break
for this to be done. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I agree that the game could have been shorter. Being such a sucker for anything aliens, I was happy to keep playing. I think where my issue with the game being so long comes into play is the reward that the ending gave versus the amount of time it took to get there was disappointing. I was not satisfied by the final sort of cutscene of the game. I felt like having put in so much time in that game, we were owed a little bit better ending than the one we got, or it should have just ended at the reactor.
Yeah, I agree. And I think maybe that in hindsight is informing why I feel like the game should have ended at the reactor, because that's like a moment where it's like that's a definitive, like that's a victory. Like you've gotten rid of something, and the end is kind of, it is what
not
it is. Not
a victory. Yeah, it's sort of just like I immediately went and looked up like what is there more? What happened here? And that was very dissatisfying for me. And maybe that's my fault because it's a survival horror game and we already know sort of the outcome if the films, right? Like Ripley never meets her daughter. So like I don't know what I was hoping for, but I was disappointed.
Yeah, it's just a cliffhanger, and it's, I don't know. It feels like there should have been an Alien Isolation 2 or like a continuation of this story or something, but it doesn't really look like that ever is going to come to pass. I think they made some comics or something like that. That was kind of like a sequel to Alien Isolation, but like I feel like we were owed a little bit more, like, or some kind of like victory, or I don't know, some kind of like good feeling to end on, and instead we got Amanda floating in space, and I think that they kind of insinuate that a ship finds her at the end, but it would have been nice to feel like some happiness.
Right. Well, and I'm curious what you think about who found her, because for me, and there's debate about this, but I feel like it had to be Weyland-Yutani coming to check on their station, because we were told that Weyland-Yutani was on its way. And if it is Weyland-Yutani that got her, that she's going to have a horrible ending. Like, it's not going to go well for her.
That was kind of my impression, too, was that Weyland-Yutani was the one who found her. Like, I feel like they're the only ones that could have found her at that point. And then not only that, but, like, that sets up a really wicked sequel where, like, now you're on this Weyland-Yutani ship, and, like, they're probably going to get the aliens, so, like, you have a completely new adventure to go on.
Yeah, I was disappointed that we never got any indication of more story and more games, because it was such a big hit, and I would love that. And there is speculation online that it's some sort of rescue vessel, but I can't remember the justification why, but there's at least a decent case. But yeah, in my mind it's Weyland-Yutani, because that's just how aliens, and I mean I think about the third Alien film, and there's no happy ending for Ripley. So
yeah, this is very much like Metroid, where like this game was, I think quality-wise, was like fantastic, and then for whatever reason, maybe it's because it's niche sci-fi, but like I think Sega had said that sales were softer than they anticipated and that they didn't warrant a sequel, and it's like, God, I've been hearing the same thing from Metroid for like 35 years now. So
oh, it's painful.
I have two, let's see. I have two more minor critiques of this game that I want to talk about before we get on out of here, and I'm curious to see if you agree with me or not. You had mentioned earlier about the hacker and all the puzzles and stuff that you need to do. I was actually kind of annoyed at like the latter parts of the game, where with all like the gimmicks that you had to do to like get ship parts doing stuff, like you have to like move circles and line them up, and then you have to like put code in and match like doohickeys, and like there's like all these different gimmicks that you needed to do with like no real like clue as to how to do any of them, and it was just like, for me it was just kind of like, ugh, okay, whatever. And now I got to move the circle to the middle of the screen or whatever. Like it certainly wasn't a make or break deal, but it was just like, I was like, ugh, all right, let's do this one now.
Well, I do have a couple thoughts on that. So, first of all, for me, one of the reasons that it took me so long to get into Metroid is, because of the various points in my life that I played Metroid, going all the way back to when I was a kid. I could never figure out what to do. Like, it wasn't until I was an adult gamer with so much experience that it was like, oh, okay, I can totally figure out how to get through this. So, for me, that, and I'm sure people listening might disagree, but that felt very Metroid to me, of just like, okay, you kind of just got to figure it out. The other thing that I would say about that is, I don't know how to hack computers. So like having to kind of figure it out as I go and like try to solve it. I imagine, that Amanda Ripley probably wouldn't just know how to do everything. So that element of having to figure it out a little bit while there's the tension that you could be killed at any time. I didn't really mind that. I mean, yes, in the moment I was really irritated because I was like, come on, like I need to do this so I don't get impaled. But that's kind of my thoughts from a developmental perspective, whether I'm okay with it or not.
I actually found that most of the silly gimmicks that I think that most of them took place when you were relatively safe. I'm talking like in particular at the end when you're trying to get the oh god, what's the ship that's coming to rescue you?
The Taurens?
Yes, the Taurens, and you're trying to align your coordinates with them or whatever, and you've just gotten in from outer space and you're doing all these different gimmicks in the cockpit or whatever. I mean, it was okay. It was just for me, I was
that
just
part,
ugh.
That one specific part you're talking about with aligning the dishes, that one did kind of annoy me.
Yeah, that again, that's probably just because that's one of the more recent ones that I can think of. I actually think during in game when you have a thread on your tail, using the hacker was actually fine and was actually pretty fun. But I have one more critique. I don't know. I'm not going to say it was bad, but I think that the map could have been improved a little bit. I think that any good Metroidvania has a really good and easy to navigate map. And I feel like the map was good, but I feel like it could have been better maybe. And I don't know really how. Maybe they could have color coded it a little bit more, so you clearly and distinctly knew what area we're in, what area connects to what. I know that probably sounds dumb, color coding, but I think that they could have done something, I think, to differentiate the different areas a little bit more.
I completely agree with that. In Metroid, if you get a secret area, right? I think in Zero Mission, they're green, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. It would have been helpful to have something like that. I found myself frustrated by using the map repeatedly in Alien Isolation, that it wasn't always clear where I was supposed to go or where I had been or what connected to what. And so that was frustrating. Now, again, I think if you play on Nightmare mode, I think there's no map at all, which is just ridiculous.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So,
What?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, So I guess then they're really just asking you to rely on memorizing your surroundings, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the original Metroid not have a map and then Zero Mission added it? Is that
Correct.
right?
The original and Metroid 2 both do not have maps, which
right.
is frustrating.
And people hand drew maps, right? That's just kind of what you do. I mean, I did the same thing for Zelda growing up, playing Zelda 1 and 2, but asking someone to sort of draw a three-dimensional map is a little bit bigger of an ask to me.
Oh, totally. It's so much harder because then you're talking different levels and different. There lots of different stuff.
I'm not an architect.
3D maps are hard to do. I think even the Metroid Prime maps sometimes are a little bit hard to follow. But this one was, I feel kind of hard to figure out where you were sometimes and what connects to what. And if you were in another area and needed to get to the medical bay or something like that, it was hard to figure out which route you needed. Actually, I had a heck of a time getting back to the marshal office because I forgot how to get
Me
there.
too.
My map wasn't super helpful to me.
I had to look that one up because I was getting so frustrated and not able to get back. Ironically, what actually I think does 3D maps pretty well is the Zelda series.
I would agree with that. Because the Zelda series is more like a 2D map, but it's separated by floor.
By
almost.
Floors. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Alien Isolation kind of sort of does that, but I don't think that they do it as gracefully.
Agreed.
So that's my only other critique of this game. But I mean, what a this is a great experience. I feel like if you're a Metroid fan, chances are if you're a Metroid fan, you're probably an Alien fan anyways. And if you're a Metroid fan and you're not an Alien fan, I think that you'll really like this game. Imagine the Alien as the SA-X in a Metroid Fusion remake, and what could have been, or what maybe still could be. And I think that I would like completely highly recommend this game to any Metroid fan. I know that some people don't really care for 3D Metroidvanias as opposed to like 2D Metroidvanias, but I think that this is up there with like probably one of the best that we've covered on Inspired by Metroid so far. And David, I know that you love it.
I absolutely love it. It's probably one of my top 5 all-time favorite video games.
Wow.
Yeah, I love it that way, which granted it gets a bump from my love of the Aliens universe, so.
Well, I think that that's fair.
Yeah.
If they ever made a Blade Runner game, that bad boy would be in my top 10 for sure. I'm going to go try and find that point-and-click game from 1997.
Oh my gosh.
Apparently it still holds up. Kotaku wrote an article about it when I was looking for it, and they say that it's pretty cool. So maybe
oh my
I'll
goodness,
be pleasantly surprised. David, thank you so much for joining me, talking Alien, talking Metroid. Tell everybody where they can check you out over on the internet.
Yeah, you can find me at David Lasby on Twitter. So that's David Lasby on Twitter, and of course on ZeldaDungeon.net, and also you can check out my site at BossRush.net.
There you go. Lots of cool content from this guy. If you're not familiar with some of David's work, you can check him out. He does, I mean, my goodness, he does Metroid, he does Zelda, he does even some work on mental health and stuff like that as well.
That's right.
On the Mighty.
On the Mighty.
So,
yep.
Yeah. Very cool stuff. Thank you again for joining me. I love talking Alien, and if we ever get to the episode where we do the first movie, we'll definitely have you on. Because,
oh my goodness, yes.
That's like peanut butter and jelly right there. But we are out of time. Thank you guys for listening and checking out this Inspired by Metroid episode on Alien Isolation. Be sure to check us out over on Twitter at Omega Metroid Pod. I am at Spiteri316. As mentioned, David is at David Lasby. And we are over on Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. Go like and subscribe. Tell that Metroid fan in your life where they can get their weekly Metroid fix. And check us out over on Discord. We have a lot of cool cats over in there talking Metroid every day. So make sure that you are one of them and come hang out with us. Until next week, everybody. Take care.